be whoever you are is no disgrace. Don't be scared if you don't fit in. Look who's in the reject bin. It's the raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Made him perfectly. So if you got a bump on your nose or lumps on your toes, do not despair. Be like the raggy doll and say I just don't care. 'Cause raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls.
raggy dolls
Raggy dolls.
are happy just to be raggy dolls, raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
The Raggy Dolls were enjoying a peaceful day in the country. Back to Front was lying flat on his stomach, looking up at the clear blue sky. Hi-Fi was listening to his music, while Lucy and Princess were looking at all the wild flowers growing in the fields. "Oh, isn't this fun?" said Princess. "There are so many different shapes and colours." "Oh, yes," replied Lucy. "And look at all those daisies. Let's make a daisy chain." "Oh, yes," thought Princess. "We can make necklaces and bracelets and crowns." Dotty was trying to do a painting of Sad Sack. "Sit still," she called. "How can I paint you if you keep on fidgeting?"
It's not my fault,
said Sad Sack glumly.
I think I'm sitting on a thistle or something.
"Well, get rid of it," said Dotty. Sad Sack fussed about and finally brought out a small sharp stone from underneath him.
Ah, that's a bit better.
"Good," said Dotty. "Now can you please sit still?" It was such a lovely day. They were all feeling really happy, except for Claude. He didn't think it was right for a smart French doll like him to be lounging around doing nothing in particular. "Zut alors," he said loudly. "I'm really bored." "Relax, Claude," said Back to Front. "There's nothing better than a nice day in the country with lots of lovely fresh air and warm sunshine and peace and quiet." But Back to Front had spoken too soon. What was that noise? Sad Sack looked around in alarm. "Oh, do keep still," pleaded Dotty.
Listen,
He said. The dolls all listened, even Hi-Fi, who took off his earphones. "Whatever can it be?" thought Princess. Lucy was all of a tremble and in danger of coming to pieces. The strange noises got louder and louder. "It sounds like a zoo," crackled Hi-Fi, listening hard. "No," said Dotty, pointing. "It's a circus. Look." And sure enough, it was. And coming straight towards them was a huge elephant. "Quelle horreur!" yelled Claude. "What is that?" "Shh," said Back to Front. "He'll hear you." The elephant lumbered towards them. He was so big and heavy, the ground shook with every step, bouncing the dolls up and down.
Oh no, it's an earthquake,
moaned Sad Sack, and the dolls ran to escape. But everywhere they ran, they were surrounded by heavy lorries, animals in cages, and a gang of men who were marching towards them. "Quick!" cried Dotty, pointing to a sheet of folded canvas. "Let's hide under here!" The dolls dived under the canvas and huddled together. "Ooh la la, it is dark in here," said Claude. "I wonder what's happening," whispered Lucy. Outside, men were pulling on heavy ropes. They pulled and they pulled, And suddenly, the Raggy Dolls felt themselves leaving the ground. Slowly, the canvas was being pulled up a tall pole. At last, the tent was up. Now the Raggy Dolls were right at the very top. Far below them, the circus ring was a hive of activity. 2 of the seals were practicing with a ball, balancing it on their noses and tossing it between each other. The circus horse was pawing the ground impatiently. The clowns were busy too, making pies to throw at one another. And 2 huge lions were roaring inside their cage, waiting for their trainer. At the top of the pole, the dolls were feeling nervous. What shall we do? However will we get down, they wondered. Don't worry, girls, said Back to Front. I'll carry you across the wire. There's a ladder on the other side. We can get down from there, no problem. Lucy, Dotty and Princess hung on terrified as Back to Front set off across the wire, walking backwards to see where he was going. Hi-Fi and Sad Sack decided they couldn't wait, so they grabbed the trapeze and swung across together. Look out! Yelled Claude. But he was too late. Hi-Fi and Sad Sack collided with the others. Claude could hardly bear to watch as the dolls fell towards the ground. Sad Sack landed on a seal. What a floppy ball, thought the seal. Back to Front landed on the circus horse, giving it such a terrible fright, it galloped off, with Back to Front hanging on for all he was worth. Hi-Fi landed on the big bass drum. Splosh! Poor Lucy. She landed in a custard pie. It was horribly sticky. But Princess and Dotty were in real trouble. They came down in the lion's cage. The lions had sharp teeth and hungry eyes. Oh dear, thought Princess. I think they're going to heat us up. But Dotty knew what to do. She picked up the trainer's whip and gave it a crack. Get back, you brutes! Oh, Dotty, you're so brave, cried Princess. Oh, I'm just lucky the lions were well trained, said Dotty, breathing a sigh of relief. Claude was still at the top of the tent pole. The dolls looked up at him helplessly. I'm okay, don't worry about me, he called down. But he was well and truly stuck. Back to Front had an idea. He'd spotted a trampoline. Together, the Raggy Dolls pushed it next to the tent pole, right under Claude. Jump! Called Back to Front. Claude looked down at the trampoline. Oh well, vive la France, here goes, he thought, and he leapt off the platform. Up and down he bounced. It was a soft, comfortable landing. Claude was down without a hair out of place. Now all the Raggy Dolls were safe on the ground. The animals really enjoyed their circus act. It made a change for them to see others doing all the work. The seals gave the Raggy Dolls a big round of applause. Well done, Uncle, The Raggy Dolls bowed and waved goodbye. Outside, they were surprised to see a long line of people. They must be crazy to go in there, said Claude.
Yes,
Said Sad Sack.
especially as they've missed the best act of the whole evening. The Raggy Dolls tent pole act. Oh, I made a joke.
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face. Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Look around and you will find people of every kind, like the raggy doll,
Raggy doll,
raggy doll,
raggy doll,
dolls like you and me. Raggy doll,
raggy doll,
raggy doll,
raggy doll,
made him perfectly. So if you're not at ease with your knobbly knees and your fingers are all thumbs, stand on your two left feet and join our raggy doll chums. 'Cause raggy dolls,
raggy doll,
raggy dolls
raggy dolls
are happy just to be raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face.
Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Don't be scared if you don't fit in. Look who's in the reject bin. It's the raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
made him perfectly. So if you got a bump on your nose or lumps on your toes, do not despair. Be like the raggy dolls and say I just don't care. 'Cause raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls
raggy
are
dolls,
happy just to be raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
One hot night in August, there was a great storm. Rain pounded on the roof of Mr. Grimes' toy factory. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled, and the raggy dolls thought they would never get to sleep.
I'm stifling,
Groaned Sad Sack.
I'm frightened.
Whispered Lucy.
I wish this thunder would stop.
Thunder can't hurt you. Count between the claps, said Hi-Fi. That tells you how many miles away it is.
1, 2, 3, began back to front. 4, 5, 6. It was like counting sheep. Very soon, all the raggy dolls were fast asleep. When they woke up next morning, the storm was over. The sky was bright blue and a beam of sunshine streamed straight into the reject bin. All the raggy dolls wanted to be out in the fresh air, even Sad Sack.
I suppose a walk might be a good idea,
He admitted,
Let's go and see Pumpernickel.
said Lucy.
It must have been scary being a scarecrow last night.
You're telling me.
Agreed back to front. So, after breakfast, they all set off through the fields to visit Pumpernickel. The grass felt cool and pleasantly damp underfoot. Birds sang in the hedges, bees buzzed, and butterflies danced in the summer air.
Isn't this fun?
Cried Lucy.
Moo!
Shh, said Dotty.
Moo!
Listen.
Moo!
Oh dear, is it lions?
Whispered Lucy,
Don't be silly.
said Dotty. Hi-Fi climbed onto back to front's shoulders and peered over the hedge.
It's a herd of cows,
He cried.
They look quite fierce.
Zut alors! Exclaimed Claude. Lucy was all of a tremble again.
Moo! Moo! No one's milked us this morning. It's most uncomfortable. Please get Farmer Brown.
Righto, no problem, said back to front nervously.
Moo!
In the next field, the raggy dolls saw some pigs. They were also making a dreadful noise.
Where's Farmer Brown? We want our breakfast. The trough's empty. We're starving,
They grunted.
I know just how they feel,
Thought Sad Sack. Soon the raggy dolls reached Pumpernickel's field. At first, they couldn't see him, but when they came closer, they found him lying flat on his face in the mud. Are you all right? Asked back to front anxiously.
Help me up.
Cried Pumpernickel.
Set me straight.
Mais oui, immédiatement, said Claude. But how?
Get Farmer Brown. He'll know what to do. Roar!
Groaned Pumpernickel. Claude took off his scarf and laid it under the Scarecrow's face so that his nose wouldn't stick into the mud anymore. Then the Raggy Dolls hurried to One Pin Farm where Farmer Brown lived. They peered through his windows. They banged on his front door and on his back door. But there was no one at home except Rufus, Farmer Brown's faithful old dog. He was locked indoors and started barking when he saw the Raggy Dolls.
Roar! Roar! Roar!
"Where's your master?" called Dotty. "There's been an accident," explained Princess. "Pumpernickel's fallen down."
The pigs need for feeding, and the cows need milking.
No, I need letting out of this house,
barked Rufus crossly.
Where's his lordship?
"We thought you'd know that," said Dotty.
Well, I don't,
snapped Rufus. He didn't like being locked indoors. Back to Front was looking in the barn. It was empty. No tractor. That's funny, he thought. Farmer Brown doesn't usually take his tractor out so early. "Something's happened," said Dotty. "I expect it was that storm last night. This calls for action, everybody. We must put our thinking caps on." Sad Sack was crouching over some tracks in the mud.
If you ask me, he said, those are tractor tracks.
I bet we find the tractor at the end of them,
said Hi-Fi. Et voilà! And Farmer Brown, said Claude. The Raggy Dolls managed to open the back door and let Rufus out. In return, he let them ride on his back as he followed the tracks in the mud. "Giddy up! Attaboy! Search, Rufus!" Farmer Brown was in desperate trouble. Last night, he'd been driving home in his tractor when the storm broke. In no time at all, the lane had turned into a river of mud. It looked as if there was a landslide ahead. So he climbed down to investigate, and before he knew how it happened, he slipped down a steep bank and found himself at the bottom of an old mine shaft. Lucky to be alive. "Help!" called Farmer Brown. He'd been calling for help all night, but no one had heard him. "Help! Help!" "Shh! Do you hear what I hear?" "Help!" asked Dotty. Rufus ran to the edge of the shaft and began barking.
Roar! Roar! Roar!
Farmer Brown was overjoyed.
Rufus, you good dog! Fetch help!
He called. Luckily, Back to Front had noticed a coil of rope tied to the tractor. The Raggy Dolls helped Rufus carry it to the edge of the shaft. "Now lower it carefully," whispered Dotty. "No problem," Back to Front whispered back.
Oh no! There isn't enough rope to reach him,
thought Sad Sack. But there was. Only just. Rufus barked and barked as Farmer Brown began pulling himself up the slippery bank. "Let us hide, my friends," whispered Claude. "We don't want him to see us," agreed Lucy, so the Raggy Dolls crept into the trailer and hid under some old sacks. Presently, they heard Farmer Brown saying,
"Clever old Rufus! Fancy remembering that rope! You deserve a medal!"
And then the tractor engine started up, and the trailer began jolting on its way.
"It's not fair," said Sad Sack. Back to Front found that rope. He should get the medal, not Rufus.
"I don't mind," said Back to Front. "Farmer Brown's safe and we're on our way home again. That's what matters." "Well said," said Dotty. As soon as he'd had some breakfast, Farmer Brown was out in his fields again. milking the cows, feeding the pigs, and seeing to Pumpernickel.
Oh dear, said Princess. I've just remembered something. Claude's scarf,
cried Lucy. Oh, c'est la vie, said Claude. It is of no importance. In the factory, there is another whole box of them. For once, that scarecrow will look, how you say, très élégant. Farmer Brown didn't know where Claude's scarf had come from. He stuck it in Pumpernickel's pocket, and for a scarecrow, Pumpernickel did look unusually smart.
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face. Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Look around and you will find people of every kind, like the raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
made imperfectly. So if you're not at ease with your knobbly knees and your fingers are all thumbs, stand on your two left feet and join our raggy doll chums. 'Cause raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls
raggy
are
dolls.
happy just to be raggy dolls, raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face.
Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Don't be scared if you don't fit in. Look who's in the reject bin. It's the raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls.
made imperfectly. So if you got a bump on your nose or lumps on your toes, do not despair. Be like the raggy dolls and say I just don't care. 'Cause raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls
raggy
are
dolls.
happy just to be raggy dolls, raggy dolls, dolls like you and me. It was a bright and breezy morning, and the raggy dolls were happy and excited.
I wish they wouldn't go so fast,
thought Sad Sack. The night before, Hi-Fi had found a map. It showed the factory, and the big field, and the dark wood.
Ooh, I wonder what lives in there,
said Lucy, thinking of monsters. She began to tremble. Back to Front suggested that there was only one way to find out, and Hi-Fi agreed.
With an early start and a steady march across country, we could reach the dark wood by midday,
said Hi-Fi. Super, said Dotty. A nature ramble. What is a ramble? asked Claude. A kind of expedition, explained Dotty. Ever such fun.
We'll need some equipment,
said Back to Front. Compass, binoculars, first aid.
and we could take a picnic,
said Princess.
Ooh, can we have cream buns?
asked Lucy. The thought of cream buns did something funny to Sad Sack's brain. He suddenly offered to carry everything.
When are we going to have that picnic?
thought Sad Sack. The raggy dolls marched on and on and on. The toy factory and the big field were soon left far behind. So was Sad Sack, but no one noticed. At last, they came to a stile. Hi-Fi held up his hand and studied his map.
That's the dark wood,
he said, pointing ahead. It looked big and mysterious and very dark. Zut alors, muttered Claude. I hope there are no wolves in this dark wood. Lucy began to tremble.
There's nothing to worry about,
said Dotty firmly.
Come on, everyone.
But inside the wood, even Dotty looked nervous. Everywhere was silent and still. Not a leaf stirred. There wasn't a breath of wind. And the air smelt of mushrooms and toadstools. Suddenly,
Whoa!
The Raggy Dolls jumped with fright.
That sounded like Sadsack,
whispered Lucy. Help!
It is Sadsack,
cried Claude.
a wolf has eaten him.
Oh dear, wailed Lucy.
Raggy Dolls to the rescue! Shouted Hi-Fi,
and they all set off through the trees.
I thought you'd never come,
said Sadsack, when at last the Raggy Dolls found him. They could see that something nasty had happened. Sadsack was stuck in a trap. Its huge metal teeth had snapped shut, holding him fast so that he could hardly move.
It's a good job you were carrying that rucksack,
said Dotty.
and the picnic hamper.
Too right, agreed Back to Front. You might have been cut in half. Hi-Fi and Back to Front forced the trap open. It was the cruel kind of trap that farmers aren't allowed to use anymore. Lucy, Princess and Dotty made a great fuss of Sadsack, who lay on his back, breathing heavily.
A bun might make me feel better,
He moaned.
a cream bun, or perhaps two.
But at that moment, another trap went off, and far away amongst the trees, the Raggy Dolls heard another cry.
Help! Help!
Raggy Dolls to the rescue!
This time, the victim was a squirrel. The dolls quickly freed it, but its tail would never look the same again.
Watch out! There may be more traps.
Warned Dotty. And there were. Lots of them. Some were hidden in the grass, and some under the piles of leaves, and some amongst the tangled tree roots. It didn't take long for the Raggy Dolls to uncover them. Back to Front took out his toolkit and made them all safe.
Who could have put those dangerous traps in this wood?
Exclaimed Dotty.
Maybe it's a poacher.
What is a poacher? Asked Claude. Dotty explained that poachers are people who go hunting and fishing without permission on other people's property.
Don't look now, but we're being watched,
warned Sadsack. Sure enough, lots of eyes were staring at them from the darkness under the trees.
Whoever you are, come out at once,
said Princess bravely. In no time, the Raggy Dolls were surrounded by all sorts of woodland creatures. Several of them looked the worse for wear, injured by traps. An old rabbit popped up out of his burrow.
It's no longer safe here,
he said. The dolls listened with horror as he told them about all the creatures who'd been caught in traps in the dark wood. A hedgehog, a fox, and 5 field mice who'd been left hanging by their tails.
It's time for us to leave,
said the old rabbit sadly.
Leave, cried Princess. Stuff and nonsense. If anyone's leaving this wood, it must be that cruel poacher.
Good thinking, agreed Dotty. But first we must find him.
No problem,
called Back to Front. He was already up a tree, looking through the binoculars. In a clearing on the other side of the dark wood, he saw a man carrying a trap.
That's him,
cried Back to Front.
He's just going into his tent.
Oh, how do we catch him?
Asked Lucy nervously.
If he's in his tent, it's easy, said Hi-Fi. I know just what to do. Listen.
By the time the Raggy Dolls reached the tent, the poacher was fast asleep. He'd been laying traps all night, so he was very tired. He didn't hear the Raggy Dolls creeping up on him.
Action stations,
whispered Hi-Fi. Dotty, Princess, Lucy and Claude loosened the pegs which held the tent to the ground. At the same time, Hi-Fi switched on his radio. He tuned it to the police wave band.
Attention all cars! Attention all cars! Called Hi-Fi. A poacher is camping in the clearing at the north end of the dark wood. He's using illegal traps. Over and out.
Hi-Fi's radio made such a noise that the poacher stopped snoring and jumped up in alarm. And of course, down came the tent. He couldn't see where he was, and he fell into one of his own traps. It snapped shut on his beard, which made him look very silly. The police were soon on the scene.
Hello, 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 said one. What have we here? A poacher, caught red-handed. You better come along with us, chummy.
The other policeman clamped some handcuffs on his wrists. Well, let's trap the trapper, said Back to Front, and I don't feel a bit sorry for him. The Raggy Dolls watched as the police car drove away.
Well done, chaps,
Said Dotty.
especially Hi-Fi.
Oh, yes, agreed Princess.
Hi-Fi has been absolutely super. 3 cheers for Hi-Fi.
Said Lucy.
Hip hip, hooray! Hip hip, hooray! Hip hip, hooray!
Meanwhile, Sad Sack was busy unpacking the picnic hamper. He began eating cream buns. First 1, then 2, and then 3, for luck.
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face. Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Look around and you will find people of every kind, like the raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls.
made him perfectly. So if you're not at ease with your knobbly knees and your fingers are all thumbs, stand on your 2 left feet and join our raggy doll chums. 'Cause raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls
raggy
are
dolls.
happy just to be raggy dolls, raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face.
Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Don't be scared if you don't fit in. Look who's in the reject bin. It's the raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls.
dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls.
made him perfectly. So if you got a bump on your nose or lumps on your toes, do not despair. Be like the raggy dolls and say I just don't care. 'Cause raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls
raggy dolls.
are happy just to be raggy dolls, raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
One day, the Raggy Dolls woke up to find a taxi in front of Mr. Grimes' toy factory. It had brought a man with a pointed beard and a large black hat. "He is French," said Claude. "How can you possibly tell?" snapped Dotty. "He has a French manner about him," said Claude admiringly. "I can tell a Frenchman anywhere."
I wonder what he's come for.
said Lucy.
So do I.
Said Sad Sack.
I bet it leads to trouble.
In his office, Mr. Grimes was looking at the visitor's card with a puzzled expression. It didn't have a name or address on it, just splashes of paint.
Very nice, said Mr. Grimes. And, what can I do for you? Andre G. Hamburger's the name, said the visitor. Founder of the Hamburger School of Toy Art, New York, New York. Oh, yes, said Mr. Grimes. I am an artiste, explained Mr. Hamburger. I produce works of art. I see, said Mr. Grimes. But he didn't really. Andre G. Hamburger went on. Now, I've heard tell on the grapevine that Grimes' Toy Factory has got real class. So, how's about a lightning tour, buddy? Show me the works.
He
He isn't French, said Dotty. He's American. Well, he has a French name, said Claude. Andre is a French name. Well, Hamburger certainly isn't, said Dotty firmly. They're coming this way. We'd better hide, said Lucy. Good thinking, agreed Dotty. So the raggy dolls hid in the reject bin. One machine was turning out Dutch dolls. Another was making poodles.
They're real cute, but they ain't what I'm looking for. No, siree.
What are you looking for? Shouted Mr. Grimes.
I need something new. Novelties. Dolls with a difference, yelled Mr. Hamburger. And when I found what I want, you'll find I ain't mean when it comes to payment.
Mr. Grimes thought hard. Suddenly, he had a brainwave. The reject bin, of course. I have a special collection of one-off dolls, said Mr. Grimes. Each one's different in a different way.
Now you're talking,
said Andre G. Hamburger. He picked up Lucy.
Wow!
Then he picked up Sadsack.
Terrific!
And finally, he picked up Claude. In the end, Mr. Hamburger just chose 2 raggy dolls, back to front and Dotty. Lucy was still trembling. Oh, do you think he'll take Dotty and back to front to New York? She asked. It's across the Atlantic Ocean, said Princess, and that's unthinkable. Where's Hi-Fi? He has disappeared, said Claude. The driver hadn't noticed Hi-Fi hide himself at the back of his taxi. Hi-Fi had found himself a safe perch and was waiting. He heard Mr. Hamburger climb in. They were off. When the taxi reached the station, Hi-Fi managed to hide in one of Mr. Hamburger's holdalls. Soon, Andre G. Hamburger, back to front, Dotty and Hi-Fi were all on the train, speeding towards London. Dotty and back to front huddled together inside the darkness of their box. They would have been very surprised to know that Hi-Fi was in a bag on the luggage rack just beside them. Before long, the sound of the train and the swaying of the carriage sent everyone to sleep. Andre G. Hamburger dreamt of the paintings he was going to sell. His latest work showed a toy tank inside a fish tank. He was going to call it Tank in a Tank. Back to front dreamt that he was in Mr. Grimes' toy factory again, bobbing up and down on the conveyor belt with dozens of other dolls just like him. Back to front woke with a start to find himself in Mr. Hamburger's studio. That's funny, he thought. I seem to be flying. Oh, Lord. He looked down and saw that he was attached to a wire coat hanger that was dangling in front of a mirror. He'd been made into a picture. Mr. Hamburger was standing at the other end of the studio.
Yes, siree,
he was saying.
That's just dandy. I shall call you Mirror Doll. And as for you, sweetheart, I shall call your picture Doll with Splashes.
Mr. Hamburger squeezed some glue on Dotty's back and stuck her on a piece of canvas. He sloshed a can of paint all over her.
Andre G. Hamburger, you are a genius, said Andre G. Hamburger, admiring his work. There you have it. Doll with Splashes.
Mr. Hamburger hung Dotty's picture on the wall beside Back to Front. Then he went off to have some lunch. Well, said Dotty, this is a fine mess. What are we going to do? No problem, said Back to Front. He wriggled and squirmed, but he couldn't get free. I'm stuck too, said Dotty, and I'm beginning to get annoyed. If only Hi-Fi was here, he'd think of something, said Back to Front.
Don't be silly,
said Dotty.
Hi-Fi's miles away.
Oh, no, I'm not, cried Hi-Fi.
And there he was, balancing on the picture rail just above them.
Raggy Doll to the rescue. I've got Mr. Hamburger's wire clippers, and I'll have you free in a jiffy. Hold still.
It's your turn now, Dotty,
said Back to Front, when he was safely on the ground again. Hi-Fi grabbed one leg, and Back to Front grabbed the other, and together they pulled. They pulled, and they pulled, and they pulled. At last the glue on her back came unstuck. All three Raggy Dolls lay in a heap on the floor.
Well done, chaps,
said Dotty.
but how do we get home? That's easy, said Hi-Fi. I've invented a button box that'll beam us home. Now that's what I call a real novelty,
said Dotty admiringly.
He's a doll of the future, all right,
agreed Back to Front.
Beam away, Hi-Fi.
So Hi-Fi pressed the button. And suddenly the Raggy Dolls weren't there anymore. Mr. Hamburger was very surprised when he came back after lunch. What had happened to his works of art? Jumpin' Jiminy Cricket! Now where in this little old world did those dolls go? He stared at the empty spaces in his pictures. Then he grinned. Andre G. Hamburger, you are a genius! Next day, people queued for miles to see his exhibition. The Raggy Dolls read all about it in Mr. Grimes' evening paper. There was a big photograph, and underneath it said, Mr. Andre G. Hamburger's toy art exhibition opened in London today. It was the success of the century. 2 pictures, in particular, caused a sensation. They were called Disappearing Doll 1 and Disappearing Doll 2.
Disappearing Doll 1 is me,
said Back to Front proudly.
and Disappearing Doll 2 is me,
said Dotty. Claude was studying Hi-Fi's button box. Tell me, mon ami, he said, could this thing, how you say, beam me à la France?
One day, maybe,
said Hi-Fi.
I'm still working on it.
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face. Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Look around and you will find people of every kind, like the Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
dolls like you and me. Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
made him perfectly. So if you're not at ease with your knobbly knees and your fingers are all thumbs, stand on your 2 left feet and join our Raggy Doll chums. 'Cause Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls
Raggy Dolls,
are happy just to be Raggy Dolls, Raggy Dolls, dolls like you and me.
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face.
Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Don't be scared if you don't fit in. Look who's in the reject bin. It's the Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
dolls like you and me. Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
made him perfectly. So if you got a bump on your nose or lumps on your toes, do not despair. Be like the Raggy Dolls and say I just don't care. 'Cause Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls
Raggy
are
Dolls,
happy just to be Raggy Dolls, Raggy Dolls, dolls like you and me.
One winter's night, it was very cold in Mr. Grimes' toy factory. It was so cold that it turned all the Raggy Dolls' noses blue.
Oh, heck, I'm shivering so much,
Said Lucy.
I think my legs are going to drop off.
Well, when's it going to get warmer?
Asked Hi-Fi. Never, said Sad Sack gloomily. It'll be winter forever and ever and ever.
Don't be silly, said Dotty. Let's do some exercises to keep ourselves warm. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
All this exercise is making me dizzy,
thought Sad Sack. Back in the factory, Claude made the Raggy Dolls some hot chocolate.
I suppose I feel a bit better,
Admitted Sad Sack.
but my nose is still blue.
Let's make ourselves hot water bottles and go to bed, suggested Back to Front. All the Raggy Dolls agreed that that was a good idea. So Lucy counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 hot water bottles. Then they all settled down for the night, except Hi-Fi, who wanted to see if he could hear any aeroplanes in the sky. Sometimes he could hear pilots talking to control as they came into land. It was very exciting. Come to bed, called Dotty crossly. But Hi-Fi was listening hard. Shh, he cried suddenly. What is it? Whispered Lucy.
I can hear something. A strange noise,
Said Hi-Fi.
Huh, it's called silence, said Back to Front. You're so used to having headphones on, you've forgotten what it sounds like without them. Huh.
But Hi-Fi went on listening. And now they could all hear something,
I picked it up when it was far away,
said Hi-Fi.
Is it a dragon?
Whispered Lucy.
Of course not,
Snapped Dotty.
It sounds like the donkey up the lane,
Said Princess.
No, not loud enough.
It is the horn of the motor car,
Said Claude.
I don't think so.
Shh, shh. It's a goose honking, that's what it is,
Said Hi-Fi.
A goose in distress, agreed Dotty.
Raggy Dolls to the rescue,
Cried Hi-Fi. And forgetting all about the cold, the Raggy Dolls rushed out into the night to look for the goose. The moon was full and it was almost as bright as day,
It's a bit spooky.
said Lucy. No problem. You can hold my hand, said Back to Front. That way, neither of us will be scared,
Can anyone see the goose?
asked Dotty. The honking was growing fainter, as if the poor bird was losing heart. Shh, said Hi-Fi again. He twiddled a knob on his headphones and listened harder than ever.
that way,
He cried, pointing to a gate that led into a ploughed field.
Attendez, attendez, over there,
Cried Claude. And there was a white shape far away in the middle of the field.
It's the goose.
Exclaimed Dotty.
Be careful,
Warned Lucy.
it might bite.
But there was no danger of that. The great bird lay in a heap with its eyes shut, quite exhausted.
It's not a goose,
Said Back to Front.
it's a swan. Poor thing,
Said Lucy.
it looks worn out.
You people were worn out too if you'd flown all the way from Siberia,
Said Hi-Fi.
Siberia? Where's that?
Asked Sad Sack. Dotty explained.
Siberia is in Russia. Every winter, swans fly all the way from Siberia to England, where it's warmer.
Sad Sack felt the tip of his freezing cold blue nose and decided he didn't understand swans at all.
Warmer?
He thought.
I don't call this warm. I call this freezing.
Oh, look,
Said Lucy.
its feet are all covered in mud.
It must have been looking for food and got stuck, said Back to Front.
It's exhausted. Whatever shall we do?
Cried Princess.
Save it, of course,
Said Dotty.
Fetch a blanket, someone.
It was hard work rolling the swan over onto the blanket. Its feet had become frozen in the mud. Back to Front took out a screwdriver from his overalls pocket and chipped away at the frozen mud while the others pushed.
1, 2, 3, heave,
said Dotty.
1, 2, 3, heave.
At last, the swan was on the blanket,
No, now we must get it to the pond,
said Hi-Fi. That was even harder, and when they got there, the pond was frozen too.
Whoa, said Back to Front. It's so strong I can stand on it.
Careful, Back to Front. You should never walk on ice until you've tested it with something.
Voila, a stone, said Claude. That is what is needed. Back to Front, stand clear. Claude threw the stone as hard as he could. The ice splintered like broken glass. The noise woke the ducks, who were sleeping amongst the frozen reeds.
Wah! What's happening? Wah! A fox! Help! Hide! Quick! Wah! Quick! Wah!
They squawked. But when they saw the Raggy Dolls and the poor white swan, they changed their tune.
Wah! How can we help? Wah!
Dotty told them what was needed, and in no time the ducks had tapped round the hole with their beaks, making it bigger. Then Claude took off his scarf and dipped it in the icy cold water. Very carefully, he wiped the mud from the swan's feet. Et voila! Now he should be able to fly again.
Well done, Claude, said Dotty. But I'm afraid your scarf is ruined. Never mind,
said Lucy kindly.
I'll wash it for you. We ought to give it something to heat,
said Princess.
Yeah, but what?
Asked Back to Front.
I've got a stale bun,
said Sad Sack.
That'll do nicely,
said Dotty. Princess softened the bun with water, and Hi-Fi pushed the crumbs into the swan's beak. It was a real team effort. After a while, the swan began to eat, but its eyes were still shut.
Wah! Wah! We'll watch over it,
said the ducks. So the Raggy Dolls crept home to bed. They were very tired and didn't wake up till late next morning.
Allez, allez, wake up, mes amis, cried Claude. I will make you a nice hot breakfast with the eggs and bacon.
Let's go and see how that swan is getting on, said Hi-Fi. But before we have breakfast...
Good thinking,
agreed Dotty.
I suppose it is a good idea,
thought Sad Sack, even though he was hungry. When they reached the pond, they found that the hole had frozen over again in the night, and the great white swan had gone. There was just the blanket left on the cold, frosty ground. But on the blanket, the Raggy Dolls saw 7 beautiful feathers, as if the swan wanted to say, "Thank you, Lucy, Hi-Fi, Back to Front, Dotty, Princess, Claude, and Sad Sack, for saving my life on a cold winter's night."
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face. Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Look around and you will find people of every kind, like the Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
dolls like you and me. Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
made imperfectly. So if you're not at ease with your knobbly knees and your fingers are all thumbs, stand on your 2 left feet and join our Raggy Doll chums. 'Cause Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls,
Raggy Dolls
Raggy Dolls
are happy just to be Raggy Dolls, Raggy Dolls, dolls like you and me. Look who's in the reject bin. It's the raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Raggy dolls.
Made him perfectly. So if you got a bump on your nose or lumps on your toes, do not despair. Be like the raggy doll and say I just don't care. 'Cause raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls.
raggy dolls
Raggy dolls.
are happy just to be raggy dolls, raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
The raggy dolls were out in the field, trying to decide what to do. "Let's play leapfrog," suggested Dotty. "Oh, yes, what a good idea," agreed Princess.
Sounds good to me, said Hi-Fi.
What is this leapfrog?" asked Claude. "How do you play it?"
It's rotten, said Sad Sack. All you do is bend over, and everyone jumps over you. Then you have to jump over everyone else.
"Well, what is wrong with that?" demanded Claude.
I can never jump over anyone else. I always squash them. Besides, I'm no good at games.
"Oh, come along, Sad Sack, do back up," said Dotty. "There must be something you can do." But Sad Sack just sighed.
No, there isn't.
All the dolls felt very sorry for him. "I know," said Lucy suddenly. "Why don't we all have a game of cricket? We can all be fielders and Sad Sack can be in bat." "Come on, Sad Sack, play."
Okay,
said Sad Sack. Dotty took a long time to run up.
well, it's now or never.
Thought Sad Sack. She tossed the ball so fast it made a big cloud of dust as it bounced in front of the wicket. "How's that?" yelled Dotty, thinking she'd hit the stumps.
Achoo! I'm not out, sneezed Sad Sack.
Bad as he was at games, he wasn't going to be out first ball. "You're out," insisted Dotty. "Not out," argued Sad Sack. The two dolls couldn't agree. Hi-Fi tried to settle things. He tried to reason with them. "Oh, these crazy English," thought Claude. "What a stupid game. I want no part of it." Lucy was confused. She couldn't make up her mind. She wobbled about, all of a dither. "With all that dust, who could be sure? This is a decision for the umpire," said Princess. Everyone, including Claude, cheered up immediately. "Right," said Dotty, and the others agreed. But Back to Front, who was the umpire, hadn't been watching the game. He was staring up at the sky. "What on earth is that?" said Back to Front.
It's called an aeroplane, said Hi-Fi.
"Ooh, yeah," said Back to Front. Hi-Fi went on to explain how aeroplanes flew all over the world, taking people wherever they wanted to go. "How exciting it would be to fly in one," thought Princess. "I wonder, do they by any chance visit La France?" thought Claude. The dolls watched in amazement as the aeroplane twisted and dived and looped the loop. What they didn't know was that it was a toy aeroplane belonging to a boy in the next field. He was making it fly by remote control. Now he was ready to try the most daring trick of all, the victory roll. At the flick of a switch, the aeroplane went into a steep dive, then spun round and round, twisting through the sky like a giant corkscrew as it plunged towards the ground.
Mayday! Help! Emergency! It's going to crash!
Ah! Oh! The The dolls were quickly on the scene. "Thank goodness no one's hurt," smiled Princess. They all studied the wreckage. Hi-Fi suggested that they could mend it and fly it themselves. What a good idea, they all agreed. Even Sad Sack.
Well, it's worth a try, he thought.
"I'll fix this in a jiffy, no problem," thought Back to Front. Claude carried the propeller, Hi-Fi and Lucy carried a wing, and the others got behind the rest of the aeroplane and pushed it.
This is better than cricket,
thought Sad Sack. Meanwhile, the boy was searching everywhere for his lost aeroplane. He didn't know about the dolls. He didn't know that they had found his aeroplane, and they were all hard at work, sewing, painting, and fixing. Before long, the aeroplane was looking as good as new.
That about does it, said Hi-Fi. Time to see if it will fly.
It was a moment of great excitement. Hi-Fi climbed into the pilot's seat. Back to Front sat in the observer's seat, while the others found themselves a safe place on the wings.
Everybody hold tight,
called Sad Sack, and on a signal from Hi-Fi, he whirled the propeller. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The engine roared, and slowly the aeroplane moved forward. Then they felt it lift. The Raggy Dolls were flying! Hi-Fi took the aeroplane very high. How small things looked from this height. Houses and trees were like tiny dots. "Ooh la la," thought Claude. "It is very breezy. I wonder how long it will take to get to France." But Hi-Fi wasn't thinking about France. He wanted to try some aerobatics. The dolls felt their tummies turn over as the aeroplane looped the loop. Soon they were whizzing over the treetops.
I suppose this is fun, thought Sad Sack. I think it could be cheering me up.
Hi-Fi was thinking it was time to stop. They were running out of fuel. So, with a hop and a bump, the aeroplane landed safely on the field. Hi-Fi looked pleased with himself. "Well, oh, Hi-Fi," said Princess, "you have given us a flight we shall remember forever." Even Sad Sack agreed. All this time, the boy had been searching for his aeroplane. Where could it be? Suddenly, there it was, right in front of him. He was delighted. He could hardly believe his eyes. It was looking as good as new.
"That was great fun," said Lucy.
Oh yes, said Sad Sack. I think I shall become an aeroplane pilot.
Muttered Dotty. "I think you should learn to play cricket before you learn to fly. I seem to remember bowling you out."
No, you didn't bowl me out. You missed.
"No, I didn't."
Yes, you did.
"No, I didn't."
Did.
"Didn't."
Did.
"Didn't."
It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face. Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Look around and you will find people of every kind, like the Raggy doll,
Raggy doll,
raggy doll,
Raggy doll,
dolls like you and me. Raggy doll,
Raggy doll,
raggy doll,
Raggy doll,
made him perfectly. So if you're not at ease with your knobbly knees and your fingers are all fuzz, stand on your two left feet and join our raggy doll chums. 'Cause raggy dolls,
Raggy doll,
raggy dolls
Raggy doll,
are happy just to be raggy dolls, raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
it's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face.
Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Don't be scared if you don't fit in. Look who's in the reject bin. It's the raggy dolls,
Raggy doll,
raggy dolls,
Raggy doll,
dolls like you and me. Raggy doll,
Raggy doll,
raggy doll,
Raggy doll,
made him perfectly. So if you got a bump on your nose or lumps on your toes, do not despair. Be like the raggy doll and say I just don't care. 'Cause raggy dolls,
Raggy doll,
raggy dolls
Raggy doll,
are happy just to be raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
One morning, when the Raggy Dolls were getting up, Hi-Fi and Back to Front noticed Sad Sack had a very long face.
What's wrong?
Asked Hi-Fi. Sad Sack was close to tears.
I'm too fat.
He blurted.
My stomach. It's too big and too soft.
Then you should come walking with us, said Back to Front. The exercise will do your power a good,
Exercise.
thought Sad Sack.
That's all very well for some, but they don't have all this weight to carry.
He looked down at his big soft stomach.
The last thing I want is exercise.
So Hi-Fi and Back to Front set off on their early morning walk without him. They were making their way towards the big field when they noticed a group of men carrying a large straw basket. The dolls ducked out of sight and watched as the men put the basket down. I wonder what they're going to do, asked Back to Front.
They're probably having a picnic, crackled Hi-Fi.
The men seemed to be excited about something. One of them took out a stopwatch.
On your marks, get set, go!
To the dolls' great surprise, a flock of pigeons flew up out of the basket.
Wow, it's a pigeon race.
was full of planks and nails. The raggy dolls set to work. Hi-Fi and Claude hammered in the nails while the others fetched more planks. Back to Front borrowed a whisk from the canteen.
What's that for?
Said Sadsack. We can use it for a propeller, said Back to Front. Meanwhile, the water around Dotty's tree rose higher and higher.
Help!
She called.
Can anyone hear me?
Hi-Fi called, of course.
rescue, please! Help!
We'd better hurry up, said Hi-Fi. Dotty's getting desperate.
The raggy dolls worked even harder. At last, the raft was finished, and in no time, they were afloat. Back to Front and Claude worked the handles of the whisk, and it began to propel the raft. Slowly at first, but then it began to gather speed.
Oh dear, I do hope we're in time.
Thought Lucy.
I hope I don't get seasick.
Thought Sadsack, looking very unhappy. Hi-Fi listened on his headphones and worked out which direction Dotty's voice came from.
Raggy dolls to the rescue! Help!
Cried Dotty. For once, she didn't sound bossy.
There she is! I see her!
Cried Lucy. Where?
There! Oh yes!
She does look upset, exclaimed Princess.
Chin up, Dotty!
Called Back to Front as he whisked the raft nearer and nearer. He stopped it just under Dotty's tree.
Can anyone help me down?
Asked Dotty in a small voice. No problem, said Back to Front comfortingly. Thanks very much, chaps, said Dotty when she was safe again.
Were you thinking of that hole as our new home?
Asked Lucy. No, said Dotty. She looked at the cold grey water and shivered. I'm a bit tired after my night out, she said. Let's talk about all that later. So Back to Front steered the raft home again across the lake. After some toast and marmalade and a strong cup of tea, Dotty felt more like her old self. She collected the drawings that the raggy dolls had made the day before and spread them out. I think I'll give up jogging for a day or two, said Dotty. Drawing is much more fun.
Does that mean you don't want to move anymore?
Asked Lucy. Move? What for? Drawing is much more exciting. Oui, and not so dangereux, n'est-ce pas? Said Claude with a grin. I don't know what you mean, Claude, said Dotty crossly, but whoever thought of moving was a very silly raggy doll. The raggy dolls giggled quietly and got on with their drawing. It's not much of a life when you're just a pretty face. Just to be whoever you are is no disgrace. Look around and you will find people of every kind, like the raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls,
raggy dolls.
made imperfectly. So if you're not at ease with your knobbly knees and your fingers are all thumbs, stand on your two left feet and join our raggy doll chums. 'Cause raggy dolls,
Raggy dolls,
raggy dolls
raggy
are happy just to be raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.